Fantastic. Lanre, Suraju, welcome to Kent Academic Exchange. I'm so happy to have you. I plan to have you on the podcast in the future at some point, but I mean, we just can't ignore the wonderful news that has happened in your life, in our lives. Yeah, OPL245, exactly. There you go, man. We can't ignore the wonderful good news that has happened in your life, in our lives, in our struggle with your victory over the forces of darkness in Nigeria, and the terrible case they brought against you, the legal perfidy, the whole shenanigans of the, I would like to actually drop names here, the Malami, Justice Department or the Ministry, and of course the even darker forces that we know of, names which we will actually drop. We are in that deep level of activism that we are not afraid of dropping names. Adoke, former Minister for Justice of Nigeria, who of course is enmeshed in the whole OPL245 scandal. And we've got good news. I will let you break it down over time for us exactly what has happened. But the first thing that I would really like to find out from you as a person and as a friend is, where do you get your courage from? This was a question I posed to Shore recently. Shore granted my first podcast interview, and I told him how I remembered his courage, his braveness, his courage, even as a in his early 20s in student union activism, and he carries it up to today. You are another phenomenon in this direction. The things I've seen you go through since we've met each other, since we've known each other over 10 years now, and what I've heard you've done as a student union activist in your past. Where do you guys get your courage from? It is unbelievable. What makes you tick? What gives you that courage to keep going on in the face of fire? In the face of fire from military regimes, in the face of fire from corrupt regimes, in the civilian era. Where do you get your courage from?
Thank you very much. And also thanks for this opportunity to be part of the history of your podcast. And I should say, this is one of the motivation that we get to derive when we see people, like you also coming up with this, no matter how little it is considered from your corner, intervention, support, and also encouragement. They go a very long way. And one of the things that you then get to learn from this is that there are expectations from you. And this is where you get the courage and motivation from. It is one of these very key areas, especially when you are driven by conviction. This is also one of, I think this should be a secret that we should have kept, but let me also share it. There are many of our traducers without better understanding of where some of us are coming from, attempts to harass, intimidate, and use this as a weapon, sometimes to either scare you away, harass you, and also possibly force you away from the path that you have chosen, without realizing that those experiences are part of the strength that actually shows to you that you can always do more. That is another source of courage and motivation.
Yeah.
The most critical one that I can assure you that you can't really buy is when you have people who shares the same ideology, philosophy, commitment with you, working with you in the same organization, and also sharing some of your experiences. I mean, you are well assured anytime that you have your back covered, at every point in time. Yeah.
You bounce off each other. You climb on the shoulder of giants like yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, as a matter of fact, quite a number of what you see are not just done by me. In fact, some of them are not done by me. I only just act as the face to quite a number of them. I mean, this is not shying away from responsibility and taking ownership and for some of the things. I mean, for the charges that came from the Ministry of Justice, it wasn't that the so-called sharing of those information were not by my personal Twitter handle or Facebook handle. It was by Eda's Twitter handle and Facebook, and it will interest you that I am not the sole operator of the Twitter. We have a communication officer who does that, but I mean, this is the responsibility that we take for some of our actions. But I can tell you, I mean, it takes you to have this level of impact, this level of motivation and drive when you have real form of support that encourages and also covers your back in dealing with issues. Yeah.
Talking about covering your back, I mean, I came late to activism. Well, when I say I came late to activism, in a sense, I mean, I regret the fact that I wasn't as politically aware as I wish I could have been in my student days. I spent my student days on other kinds of activities, but not student unionism. But I did see and I did admire this, standing up for each other thing in the student union leaders of my era, which of course you were the student union leader of Yaba College of Technology at a point in time in the was it the late 80s? Anyway, so I saw this event once, and it's still one of the most impressive things I've seen amongst Nigerian youth. Way back in the 80s, this then young man, Labaran Maku. You all know Labaran Maku is now a minister, deputy governor, and wanted to become I'm sure he's still going to be all kinds of great things in the future. Labaran Maku was a firebrand union leader when we were in the university. And I was describing to my friends recently how I saw him escape the hands of the dreaded SSS. In those days, it might even have still been called the NSO, Nigerian Security Organization, or is it National? I think it's Nigerian Security Organization. The NSO was out for Labaran Maku, and because he was organizing one of the most effective, student agitations against. There were so many agitations then. It's very difficult to find out which one it is now. It easily could have been the bombing of Libya by the then first Clinton administration, where we all went out and we made ourselves our opposition against the government quite visible. And the NSO was out for him. It's either that or it would have been one of the first decreases in subsidy of petroleum, which started in the 1980s. So the NSO came to our campus. They pinned down Labaran Maku into Block A of the Naraguta hostels in Jos. Somehow, the Labaran Maku and his gang, they knew that had taken place. Now, there's this quirky thing about Labaran Maku. He was always wearing the same babariga, the slim Hausa outfit. It's not the barbaric guy, but barbaric guy is the big one. The slimmer one. He wore the same color. Kaftan. Exactly. He wore the same kaftan every day, 365 days a year. It was always neat. It wasn't dirty. Maybe he had several ones, but it was exactly the same color and his little black cap. Always. So on this day, the place was surrounded. And I happened to be coming out of Naraguta A block as well. And I felt the atmosphere ticking and that we were surrounded. But of course, they knew who they were looking for. Do you know what Labaran Maku and his friends did?
Right.
They made Labaran Maku change his uniform, so to speak, gave it to another person. He wore, for the first time, when I saw him, he was dressed in shirt and jeans, normal shirt and jeans, and then he had removed his cap and he combed up his hair. Right. Then he stepped out of the building 15 steps ahead of a fellow coming behind him who was now dressed as him, wearing his clothes, with his cap. It was a brazen move. So he stepped out of the place, and all the SSS or NSO, as the day were called, their eyes saw Labaran Maku coming behind, and that's the one. They rushed and went to arrest that person dressed as him, and Labaran Maku simply walked past, and along with me, we entered the taxi and left the place. Wow. I don't think I've recovered from that move. The sheer brotherhood that would make someone dress up as someone that he knows that the dreaded military looking for, just to allow his friend to escape.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because everybody believes in the cause that you're leading. Everybody are part of the whole system. Unfortunately, we don't get to see that level of, courage, that level of commitment, that level of drive in the crop of current students' unionism anymore. But almost what you would just want to also agree is that the state of the students' unionism is also a reflection of the society. It's very difficult to see quite a number of, lecturers that are also in the realm of the ASU of those days. You can hardly see politicians who are in the realm of Awolowo, Zik, Tafawa Balewa, Ahmadu Bello, and the rest of that. So we've lost the culture of selflessness, of brotherhood. It is all about the selfish interest. It is all about primitive accumulation of wealth. It's all about opportunism, and we've totally lost, that. And the key thing that you see in many of the areas where you still find some measure of activism, go check properly. You will see that you will find a few of the comrades who actually come way back from the students' union era that you just described, are the ones that you still find, in any of the up and standing, civil society movement organizations in Nigeria. The most feasible ones that you can point at will have this connection with this historical effort of the students' unionism of those periods. Other than that, you still find, even if you come to the civic space, you still find quite a number of so-called, activists within the civic space who are just NGO workers and about just getting access to funding from donor agencies. Then
we've seen a few disappointments. We've seen a few people who have disappointed the struggle. And again, I'm never afraid of naming people, and Dino Melaye. Dino Melaye, senator, ex-senator now as is, thankfully, was a student union activist. We also have other examples of student union activists who have become politicians and have become regular kleptocrats. How do you guys, who were purists in that, and who remain purists on this. So how do you handle this disappointment?
Sometimes, unfortunately, because the Nigerian system allows some kind of like an activist, Dino really didn't hold a position. We have some caliber of student union activists who are, as you want to just check with them, they don't even hold political office as a student union leader, but they are more vibrant and they remain very conscious and also dedicated to the struggle, even up until now.
Yes.
But people like Dino were not just like really student union activist or leader. Dino was just more of like some of those students who were not really academically okay, who would hide under the activism and student unionism to escape their academic inadequacies by pretending to be activists. Dino was not really in the caliber of those that you would consider, and there are quite a number of people like him, you know, around, and that is why by the time he became the politician, it was very easy for him to totally depart from the path of you know, the consciousness or ideological orientation that was guiding the activism at that time or student unionism. So there are quite a number of them, you know, that disguised as activists and use that to actually see either party nomination, either political appointment offices, and after that they show their true colors,
yeah.
by the path that they took, assuming the political offices. But you know, over time, they get to reveal their identities. So it's only a form of this deception that lasts for only a few periods.
Now, the Buhari administration came into power riding on the waves of public disenchantment with decades of acute grand corruption throughout the corridors of power and in the country, Nigeria. And there was a lot of expectation on that administration, still ongoing. Few good months left over the next 1 year maximum. No case perhaps exposes Nigeria's disappointment with the Buhari administration and its fight against corruption more than the OPL245 case. And of course, the debacle which it has turned out to be in terms of the dilatory prosecution from Nigerian authorities and the bullying that the Nigerian Ministry of Justice has just attempted on you and trying to change the course of your life negatively. Can you please tell us what is the OPL245 scandal all about, and what has been your involvement in this struggle to expose this scandal?
Yeah, yeah, it is actually the most unfortunate experience for some of us in the anti-corruption community in Nigeria. Like you said, the emergence of Buhari in 2015, you know, really gave some kind of inspiration and also raise of hopes for the genuine and sustained fight against corruption from Nigeria. And the indication actually from the beginning had a very good signal for quite a number of organizations that both in fighting endemic corruption within the period that it was in office, and the same with some of its officials. And one of the remarkable thing that the Buhari administration did, and later it became to us clear that as much as Buhari as a president seems to believe in fighting corruption, it lacks the understanding of the strategy to deal with that. It lacks the tenacity that is required to sustain such an endeavor, and it also lacked, the exposure or even the guts to deal with those who would undermine the successes of such intervention. The government was very lucky to have appointed
Hello. I think we are losing. Okay. Sorry, could you take that again? We lost you for a while. That the government was lucky to have appointed.
As at the time, that was Ibrahim Magu as the acting EFCC chairman. And that became the poster boy for the anti-corruption effort of the government. You can tell, I mean, EFCC wasn't the only anti-corruption agency. And that's why I said, the credit really might have actually gone largely to the wrong person by just saying it was Buhari. But more importantly, it should be going to Ibrahim Magu because we had the police force, which had the special fraud unit and has power to also fight corruption and fraud. Nothing happened in the police force. No concerted effort to reposition it to deal with anti-corruption from the government. We had the ICPC. It was the same experience, with ICPC for more than 5 years that the government was in the office. There was no really tangible, concrete effort at repositioning the ICPC to deal with graft. We had the Code of Conduct Bureau. As it is now, you still can point to significant achievements with the Code of Conduct Bureau in dealing with the issue of corruption. So it was the choice of the EFCC chairman to actually imbibe the mantra of that fighting corruption and made so much sacrifice to achieve that for Nigeria. Which ultimately led to his persecution. So it was that government, it was that regime of Ibrahim Magu that actually sustained the investigation. The previous government already closed every form of collaboration with international partners. When it became manifest that the $1.1 billion that was paid, I mean, OPL245 was about one of the most lucrative, oil blocks in Nigeria. It was originally awarded, criminally awarded by the petroleum minister under the brutal regime of Sani Abacha, Danny Tete, to a company in which he had interest with the son of Abacha, Mohammadu Abacha. The government of Obasanjo actually revoked the license on the grounds that it was in conflict. The allocation was in conflict with the Code of Conduct for Public Office Holders, which forbids any public office holder from awarding contracts to a company in which he or she has an interest. And it was a strict liability offense that, with that established, the proceeds of that process is forfeited to the federal government without even much of a problem, But unfortunately, Obasanjo was not able to thoroughly deal with it. Rather than reverting it to the government and then going through the lay-down procedure for reallocation, it was surreptitiously reallocated to Shell, which then sparked another round of controversy, leading to the ultimate revocation.
Hello.
Well, challenge of the license by Labu. Hello?
Yes,
can you hear me?
I can hear you. Go on.
Okay, all right. So that led to a controversy, and unfortunately, the license was again returned back to the government. But when the government of Jonathan, during the period of Yaradua, the hawks looking for opportunity to benefit from that criminal procedure could not advance their interest. So for like 3 years of Yaradua, nothing happened with the license. So it remained revoked, and it was with the federal government. But when Jonathan came, based on the connection between Jonathan and Etete, both from Bayelsa State, Jonathan being a teacher to the children of Etete before he became a lecturer and then deputy governor and all the rest of that. And with Adoke, who has also been like a lawyer to Malabu, according to reports, and had also some connection based in Kano to some of the people who are connected with the Malabu and OPL245. The opportunity came for the principal actors to reawaken the already rested revocation of the license by entering into some very, I should say, unpatriotic, agreements with Malabu to agree with Shell and ENI to buy the license of Malabu. At the point when the Federal High Court, where Malabu went to challenge the revocation of the license, actually lost the case to the federal government. So the federal government was in the point of strength in terms of the revocation and recovery of the license. But these guys went to give the license back to Malabu, without actually getting any serious concession for Nigeria. And at that point, when it was eventually sold to ENI and Shell, 1.3 billion was collected. Out of this
$1.3 billion
dollars, exactly.
Which is about 300 million above the usual amount Nigeria spends annually on its health budget.
Yes, about twice of what is spent on that. But by the evaluation that we did, as at that time, that license should have actually gone for something in the region of about $5.6 billion.
So basically, you're talking about a fifth of the amount of what the oil block should have gone for. Is what was asked for by Nigeria.
Absolutely, and all the
who does that? Who sells anything at a fifth of its price?
Well, it's only when you don't have the bastards in the family grown up to the age of dispensation of the assets that you say that does not happen in any family. But the moment they grow or they are sent to offices and power, like it just happened between 2010 and 2015, then you can expect this.
You expect the impossible.
Of to have happened. I mean, it wasn't that it was just 1.3 billion that was paid. Nigeria only got $250 million. 1.1 billion was not paid into the federation account. And the law says that for every revenue that is generated in the name of Nigeria or wherever, it goes into the federation account, number one. Number two, for any allocation and payment to be made from such an account, it has to be appropriated by the National Assembly. This money was not appropriated by the National Assembly, even though it was paid into the escrow account that was opened for Nigeria with JPMorgan Chase Bank in London. The money was now transferred. Just 250 million was paid into the account.
So let's get this straight. The money was expected by Nigeria, and it was agreed that it will be paid into JPMorgan Chase.
Yes, there was, so because of the whole controversy that was surrounding the oil license. Originally, when it was allocated to Shell in 2006 by Obasanjo, there was an escrow account that was already opened. So at that point, out of the amount that was meant to be paid, yes, there was already a 50 million that was paid into that account. Okay. So as part of the bonus that was meant to be, signature bonus that was meant to be paid, yeah, for the allocation, there's a 250 million that was needed to be paid. So a 200 from the 1.3 billion was added to the 50 million that was there, okay, and made up to 250 million out of the 1.3 and was paid now to the federation account, while 1.1 billion was retained in that so-called depository or escrow account to be transferred to somewhere else. So
wait,
there was no appropriation.
What do you mean by somewhere else? Do we have? Yes, so do we have?
Get to see,
sorry.
Yeah. So when that was done, yes, contrary to the laid down legal procedure for payment from any money that is accruable, because when you say money coming to Nigeria as a country, Nigeria is a federation, yeah, that comprises of states, federal, and the local governments. Yes. So such an amount that comes into the federation account is meant to be shared appropriately in a statutory format that is laid down for the 3 tiers of government. So just one tier of government does not have the authority and power to pay out without the legislative backings. So the 1.1 billion was then transferred between just some few members of the executive, not the legislature, not the Federal Republic of Nigeria, but just the federal government, which is just one of the 3 tiers, yes, made an attempt to pay the money to the account of Malabu.
Malabu being a private company. Malabu is a private company. Owned Absolutely. By who? Owned by who?
Originally owned by 35% for Danny Tete.
Danny Tete was our former minister of oil.
Former minister who originally allocated the oil license to himself in 1989.
So Danny Tete is a what we call a PEP, politically exposed person, who now has a private company that he awarded an oil license to himself, and then by the year you are talking about, he succeeded in getting $1.1 billion paid into that private account.
I mean, the part of it,
wow.
I mean, when you get to this criminal circle, there's always the dog eats dog.
Yes.
Originally, the Malabu that got the license was 35% owned by Etete, 50% owned by Mohamed Abacha, and
Mohamed Abacha is the son of the late dictator Ibrahim Abacha.
Yes. Absolutely.
Sonny Abacha.
And 15% owned by the third shareholder, who was holding it in trust for God knows who. The Malabu that eventually got the 1.1 billion already succeeded in manipulating the share ownership of Malabu with several underhand dealings done at the Corporate Affairs Commission, and excluded all the other shareholders, owning wholly the 100% of the Malabu company, totally skimming out the Abacha family and Mohamed Abacha and the other shareholders, and got the 1.1 billion to himself. So whereas it was assumed that 1.1 billion was going to Danny Tete, rather there are other government officials, those who facilitated the
transfer, the illegal transfer.
Yeah, the revalidation of the license for Malabu, the engagement of the process for Malabu to sell to ENI and Shell, getting some percentage from the 1.1 billion. So from that 1.1 billion, there was an attempt to send it to Lebanon, which failed. The Lebanese bank rejected it and said no. We saw the involvement of Danny Tete, as at that time Danny Tete has been convicted in France.
Convicted for what?
Money laundering.
Money laundering.
Yeah.
So we are dealing with a recidivist here, someone who commits crimes of the same pattern.
Yeah. And there was that followed up attempt to transfer it to Lugano in Switzerland, because these are actually safe havens for some of these funds. But as safe as those places were, they rejected the money. The bank in Lugano also rejected it because they suspected the volume of that amount of money, where it's coming from, and the accounts that it was going to. Eventually, they succeeded in convincing JPMorgan to then transfer it to Malibu accounts that were hurriedly opened in Nigerian banks, in two banks. And the money was transferred to Nigeria. As at the time that the money was going to be transferred, it was meant to be the 1.1 billion. But one of the middlemen who also claimed entitlement to about 20% of the money decided to go to court because he wanted his own payment before the 1.1 billion is moved. He wanted to be paid directly from the escrow account. Maybe that was the agreement or whatever, we never know. And the court in London succeeded in freezing about 200 from that amount of money by the UK court. So they could only transfer $801 million to the Malibu account in Nigeria in two different tranches to two different banks, 401 to First Bank, and then the $400 million to the second bank. This was how the 401 and the 400, 801 in total, started moving from the Malibu account to some very funny personal private accounts of people that are connected with Jonathan, people that are connected with Adoke, and there were several disguised means of buying property and reselling it at very ridiculous discounted rates to politically exposed persons, particularly and most notoriously Mohamed Adoke, who was the main anchor person for the transactional process that led to the sale of the license. And from what became also public from the UK court, where Nigeria has gone to sue the JPMorgan, because when this government, I mean, which is one of the credit that goes to the government of Buhari, like I started, it was Magu who actually went ahead to investigate and also collaborated with the Italian court in actually digging into what actually happened with the transaction, which exposed a whole lot of money laundering cases in Nigeria. Unfortunately, even the Attorney General, Abubakar Malami, wrote a private memo to the president in 2018, requesting the president to stop EFCC from investigating the matter, claiming there were insufficient evidence to succeed with prosecution. We knew that this was that was under the inducement of some of the characters that were involved in the deal. Subsequently, the Buhari gave the EFCC the go-ahead because the EFCC then made a submission to convince the president that they have more than enough evidence, and that the fact that even in Italy, there was already an ongoing prosecution of the people that were associated with the thing. And EFCC succeeded, as at now, in not only proving that they can sustain the charges. They have 3 different, cases that have been filed against, including Shell and ENI, their local companies, some of their officials, Mohamed Adoke, Abubakar Aliyu, who was the owner of a company called A Group Properties. That company, a private company actually, got about $542 million from that, $801 million that was paid, to the Malibu account in Nigeria. So the whole process of moving the the fund around was so much disguised that you really would not know the connection. It was as bad as, $2 million was given to Bureau de Change to convert to Naira and pay the Naira value into the account of Mohamed Bello Adoke. Yeah. And not to raise, the alert of the financial intelligence unit. The money were paid because the threshold for you to pay, and then the bank would be obliged to actually alert the NFIU is 10 million naira a day. The Bureau de Change guy, on the instruction of Adoke, was paying 9.9 million, 9.5 million the same day. Like in different, tranches, the same day, like 10 times, like 15 times, over a period of 1 week, and about 300 million was actually paid into this particular account.
So can I get this straight? Danny Tete not only was instrumental to the creation of this deal, but he was also in charge of the fanning out of the funds, the illegal funds, to members of.
Because they really don't trust Danny Tete, and because maybe Tete was not just also as well smart enough, or maybe he doesn't have the local connection to deal with the funneling of the fund. They actually trusted more Abubakar Aliyu, who owns the A Group properties, in actually dispensing the proceeds of the crime. So that was how they paid the 546 million to the account controlled by A Group properties. And A Group properties was now responsible for moving the money to different individual interests and also stakeholder in the deal. Yeah.
But Etete did very well himself in the deal. I mean, immediately the day the funds were wired to him, I understand he went on a buying spree.
He had a private jet.
He bought a private jet, bought wristwatches, bought cigars.
He got a golden visa in Portugal. He actually also married a young Belarusian lady and took her to Portugal on the golden visa. Luckily we got the private jet track and we alerted the federal government, and the private jet is currently seized in Canada and it's going through the process of forfeiture. They know each other. So like I said, they know how the Abacha family was also skimmed out of the original ownership of Malibu. Yeah. So even though they perpetuated it together, they really would not trust each other to have left the whole $801 million with Danny Tete. So that was why they had to come up with a better arrangement with someone they trust. They trusted more to warehouse the fund.
I mean, sorry, Lanre. One of the things that disgusts me about this whole, terrible scandal is the way the Nigerian elites system are pretending that this elephant in the room is not actually in the room. Nobody really seems as passionate in getting our money back, our patrimony back, and they've left this to just a few of us. I mean, you and I sat recently in London here, listening to the testimonies in the case that the Nigerian government is finally having against JPMorgan Chase on why they paid this money that they should not have paid illegally, even though they were aware that from their own simple due diligence checks that they should not have paid the money. And we listened for about 4 or 5 days to this testimony given by the Nigerian banker, top Nigerian banker who was making the decisions, the account officer for Malibu, who maintained a very close relationship with with Adoke. So there are two things I want to mention here, and I want to take your views on. One is what's Adoke's personal involvement in this debacle, and secondly, how do you feel about this conspiracy of silence, where everybody pretends that this money doesn't matter, when, as I said, it amounts to a full year's of, more than a full year of our health budget. And nobody is interested in OPL245. Nobody is interested in getting that money back. They just want to move on. And this is one of the problems with having too much money, because I believe Nigeria is having too much money in its hands, or too much prospects of money. Otherwise, who will not be interested in getting the full amount of $1.13 billion back from the hands of kleptocrats who have it? Dan, we have him, a terrible human being facing the consequences. We hope it will get there. Multiple investigations, multiple cases against him. But Adoke, and that's the other point here. Sorry, you must try to remember. The first one is Adoke as a person, and the second one is this conspiracy of silence. Adoke, you and I were at the anti-corruption session at the last Nigerian Bar Association conference held in Port Harcourt. And we watched in horror when at the opening ceremony of that NBA session, or the NBA conference, this same Dan, I'm mixing them up now, Adoke, this same Adoke is now being reintegrated into polite circles. He was allowed to be introduced at the conference. I think he nearly was invited to the high table, and he was there along with such other delectable figures like Saraki, the former, what do you call him, president of the Senate, also facing multiple investigations. And then Father Kuka granted the whole thing the divine blessing by all pretending to be the forces of good, when we know Adoke is as dirty as they come. We have the elite system trying to reintegrate him. This is somebody who was he not even deported from Dubai? We brought him in as a fugitive from justice, and now he's been reintegrated without having coughed out what he has unlawfully swallowed, if one may put it like that. Please, I don't want to be the only one talking about this. Please go on.
I think, the genesis, and that is where you also know where the interest of, criminal intent and the purpose for which the whole transaction was consummated was the direct involvement of Adoke as the Attorney General. The two principal ministries in the country responsible for consummating such transaction and dealing with oil licenses, the primary ministry is the Ministry of Petroleum Resources. That is the first one. The second ministry, so the petroleum industry, ministry deals with the Department for Petroleum Resources. So all the allocation, revocation, and all the rest were meant to have been contracted and consummated by the Ministry of Petroleum Resources. That's the first one. The second one, the Ministry of Finance, which is the one that was meant to be responsible for operating accounts, opening accounts, and also dealing with the fund payment. That is why it was called the Ministry of Finance. The two ministries have director of legal, who are usually appointed from the Ministry of Justice. So they represent the Office of the Attorney General and advise these other ministries in terms of contracts and negotiations and what have you. But unfortunately, because of the direct involvement, the direct interests that were involved in this particular Malabu deal, every role, transactions, connections, and meetings were done by Adoke and in Adoke's office. So Adoke concentrated in his office the power and also the role of the Ministry of Finance and also the Ministry of Justice, such that at the point when the resolution agreement was drafted, the director in the Department of Petroleum Resources objected to the draft, resolution agreement. As a matter of fact, one of the things that also became very scandalous and revealed during the Italian trial was that the original resolution agreement that was meant to be drafted by Nigeria and lawyers in Nigeria for Shell and ENI to consider. Part of the leak of the documents that came from the Shell file when the office was invaded by the Dutch police was that the original communication releasing that resolution agreement was from the system in Shell, meaning that the resolution agreement that was meant to be drafted by Nigeria and the lawyers in Nigeria was actually drafted from the office of Shell and given to Nigeria to adopt like his own document. I mean, this is something that was meant to have been drafted by Nigeria. And one of the directors at the DPR, Obaje, objected to the terms of the contract.
Obaje? Yeah, I know him. I mean, we were together. We were together on the Nigeria-Cameroon Mixed Commission. Very decent man. Okay. I didn't know of his involvement in this matter at all. Very decent man.
So he objected and said the conditions that are in the resolution agreement are detrimental to the interest of Nigeria. This objection raised by this director was dismissed by Adoke without correcting the clauses that were flagged by the bureaucrat who was the sole responsible for the negotiation of such an agreement. The payment for the transfer of the fund was meant to have been instructed by the Ministry of Finance. Adoke took up that responsibility by now dealing directly with the bank. And that was what you heard in London, where the account
the commercial, what's the Admiralty Court?
Business and Human Rights Court in the
Admiralty Court, in London.
The bank had direct dealings, meetings, communications with Adoke, such that the email that also became the subject of controversy was sent by Adoke at the time when he was no more a minister. And he didn't use his own email address. He actually used the email address of the A Group properties owned by A. Aliyu, who facilitated the disbursements of the $540-something million to some unknown people from the $801 million that were paid. So from the beginning, everything technically started from Adoke, sidelining the Ministry of Finance and also the Ministry of Petroleum Resources with no input at the time, even when the money was being paid. And our partners in the UK wrote a letter to the Minister of Finance expressing concerns about the payment of that money to some companies that are not known to the deal, and they sound suspicious. Ngozi actually also objected to the payment as the minister.
Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who is the current Director General of the World Trade Organization.
Absolutely, objected to the payment by writing a letter to say there's a need to clear all the controversies surrounding the, because at that time, the bank was going to pay the money and there was no legitimacy, no ground, except email from a private company Yahoo address, not an official email, only just bearing the name of Mohammed Bello Adoke. And it was sending to the bank for the first time the resolution agreement that was signed between Malabu and Nigeria, Malabu and Shell and Oil, and also Nigeria and Malabu. So you can see the hands of Adoke, and that was why it became also the central character in the whole play that you're seeing around. The conspiracy of silence that you mentioned on the part of the elite, it's as a result of two dominant factors. One, quite a number of them are also involved either in this one or in some other deals that are not totally different from this one. So go and read on the P&ID also scam, and you will see how
of which the country has lost about $7 billion.
No, Nigeria was meant to lose about $9.6 billion. If not that, like I said, back to Magu again.
These figures send me.
Anybody.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, they conspired. It was the conspiracy to the extent that the lawyer that was employed by Nigeria to represent Nigeria at the arbitration actually got compromised. Not only was he only compromised, he also compromised official of the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, and direct payment of funds were traced to the accounts of both the officials. And that's why some of them are standing trial in court for money laundering, bribery, and also betrayal of trust. You're
talking about the PID case.
PNID case.
Yeah.
And when you come to the NBA conference in Port Harcourt, it is unfortunate, and I would want to also say, without fear of any contradiction, one of the key professions that has been deeply enmeshed, either as enablers or players in the whole corruption in Nigeria, is the legal profession. Unfortunately, there are quite a number of lawyers who are either key players, like I said, or representing them in court to assist by not getting justice, but either escaping justice.
Bello Adoke himself is a lawyer. He was a minister of justice.
You can understand what I'm saying. But what happened in Port Harcourt was really very unfortunate. It's a complete takeover of that profession by people who have serious, strong affiliation with the People's Democratic Party. Port Harcourt is the state that is governed by PDP, and the governor does not hide his penchant for either donating money to government or professional association to either curry favor or at the same time
he gave we understand that he gave the Nigerian Bar Association up to ₦1 billion to host that conference.
That was what went in there. And when you look at it, so go and look at the profile of all either the serving or the former politically exposed persons or public office holders that attended the conference in Port Harcourt. They are from the main fold of the PDP. Tambuwal was there, who was the governor of, even though he's a lawyer, you can say, but Saraki was there. No, he's not a lawyer, he's PDP.
It's a presidential hopeful.
Not only there, absolutely, he was there at the opening ceremony.
He came by private jet. I can confirm that. He came by private jet. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, so most of all of them, and that platform became, unfortunately, by the NBA, became a platform for quite a number of most of those who have been accused of one form of corruption or the other, but specifically belonging to PDP as a political party, to have that kind of not only just reintegration, but even repackaging before the public by that gathering in Port Harcourt. So it was not just really disappointing seeing that play of events. You know, it is also just sad that both the elite and some of the professional association acting as not just enablers for corruption.
On the upside, Lanre, on the upside, I must, to be fair, mention that the last NBA conference was also the first time in a long time that the Bar Association has allowed a session to hold on corruption. As a result of the usurpation of the NBA by political interests, particularly the opposition figures, because many of them are facing all kinds of trials. The Bar Association And in fact, there's a point in time where the president of the Bar Association himself was facing EFCC investigation. They've shied away from hosting any sessions on anti-corruption, which I think is scandalous in its own right. But Port Harcourt was the first time we had not just a session, but a very successful session at that. Very well attended. The hall was packed full. The audience participation was fantastic. You were able to speak, and thank God at that time you were speaking from a very bad place in terms of personal circumstances, so it was a strange conference in a sense. It was a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde conference. It was in the hands of the terrible forces, and we still had our play. But let's come back to the fighting back of corruption. The Nigerian suspects in the OPL245 case began a bizarre fight back against the civil society and academic community, who have been able to bring this case back into public view. And a strange complaint was actually laid by Mohammadu Buhari against you with the Nigerian police force. Although Nigeria is itself prosecuting Mohammadu Adoke as we speak for money laundering offenses concerning receipts of monies from the Etete source, this same suspect, this same suspect,
in 3 different cases,
in 3 different cases, thanks for that clarification. This same suspect was able to manipulate the police to embark on controversial investigations of yourself into the origins of a certain email which contained his own name, upon which JPMorgan acted, or it was one of the reasons why JPMorgan agreed to pay the money into this private account we talked about. And he was able to somehow get the police to charge you with something called cyber stalking. I mean, this is just one of those things where you shake your head and wonder what universe we are living in. Cyber stalking, because you insist on trying to find out how this email was successful in getting money out from the bank. And the bank has not said that the email does not come from Adoke, but Adoke is claiming that you cyber stalked him and got the police to charge you. And you faced a very terrible period where you kept on about 4 or 5 times or 6 times actually, you had to go back to Abuja from Lagos, which is a journey of 1,000 kilometers, flying in, staying in hotels, and then not knowing what is going to happen. On one occasion, I mean, I was fortunate to accompany you on, and I found the whole experience very oppressive. You know, there's one thing I don't like in my life. I don't like pain. I must confess about that. I must confess about that. And I was just thinking while we were sitting in the depth of the police headquarters in Abuja was, what if these guys decide to make our lives interesting and just take us into sales? I mean, we live in a country where such things will not be completely impossible. So he was able to engineer this oppressive charge against you. How did that go? What was the charge? And how did it get dispensed of by the Nigerian criminal justice system?
Okay, thank you. I think it is like you described, a situation where the unexpected could happen and actually happened. You know, the beginning of that was to the extent that the particular email surfaced in London in 2020, when JPMorgan actually also, as part of the processes filed in court, submitted an email which was actually sent to JPMorgan on the 21st of June 2011. And that email actually emanated from A Group Properties email address, which is aggroupproperties@yahoo.com. And it has the signature of Mohammadu Buhari.
Yes.
signing off the email. And that email to the bank actually transmitted for the first time to the bank the resolution agreement that was signed between Nigeria, Malabu, Shell, and ENI. And the signatories to that resolution agreements were Dani Tete, Mohamed Abelu Adoke, and Desiani Alice Maduka as petroleum minister, meaning that that document was exclusive to those three people as at that time. So in case where someone actually forged the email or hacked the email of a group properties, it would have been difficult to have had that document, you know, as at that time. As at that time, we didn't even know, but there was some communication between the bank and Adoke that preceded the email. But in London, we realized during the trial that you mentioned, that you and I observed, Bayo Shomake, who was the designated person, contact person to the FRN by JPMorgan, actually told the court that Adoke rang on the 20th, the day before, trying to give verbal instruction for them to transfer the money to Malabu's account in Nigeria.
They were talking. It was an ongoing relationship. They talked several times. They met.
That was after they failed attempts to send the money to Switzerland and Lebanon. So sorry. Then when they wanted to make it, they want to send it to Nigeria. Adoke had to call for the money to be transferred to the account. And the bank, according to Osholake, opened court that the bank told him that they don't take verbal instruction for such transaction to happen. He then promised on that 20th that he was going to send them written instruction. And that was when the email was sent on the 24th. So as at that time, I mean, this is someone that can lie over on the same issue, tell nothing less than 4 or 5 stories, continue lying to himself and also believing his lies. Meanwhile, he had written a book where he had said that during the period, on the 21st of June, was the interregnum between the first term of Jonathan and the second term of Jonathan. On the May 29th, the night of May 28th, the cabinet, including that of Adoke as Attorney General, was dissolved. And a new cabinet was not reconstituted until July 3rd. So by 21st of June, Adoke was no more the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General. So he lacked the authority to send that email. So he had also lied that between that period in his book that he had traveled out of the country, he was not having any communication that was connected with official duty and assignment. So he was trying to dissociate himself from the email, knowing that he had also committed the atrocity associated with that email. So, when we got wind of that email, and so our partners in the UK and Italy informed the Italian prosecutor about the existence of that email, which was a major indictment, you know, both on Adoke for using a private company to send email on behalf of a country like Nigeria to a bank to get an instruction across, number one. Number two, is also an indictment on JPMorgan to have responded to an email coming from a private company email address and also from an individual who was not in office as at that time, and that forming part of the basis for sending the money. So the Italian prosecutor saw the issues that were raised and then requested from that email from the UK court. So through the Special Fraud Office, which is the UK authority, the Special Fraud Office went to the court, investigated the document, found it to be authentic and truly in the court, got a copy from the court file and transmitted it to the Italian prosecutor, saying, yes, the document that you asked for under the European investigation order, which is the mutual legal assistance for the law enforcement agencies. And lo and behold, the email was there, sent from A Group Properties on the 21st of June, signed off by Mohamed Bello Adoke. And this document was tendered in court in Italy, accepted as evidence. And every document that, as at that time, we don't even have a copy of it. Everything that then becomes accepted in court as evidence becomes a public document. So eventually, some of the Italian journalists got to obtain it from the court in Italy and then published it. And that was how Adoke got to know that the wind already blown off, the cover of his house. So immediately, he issued a statement to disclaim, that email. And after the disclaimer, which was very weak, still claiming he was not in office, and then also saying whenever he signs off on a document, he signs with his prefix, which is the SAN. So it's always there for him, but that was not also attached to that email. I mean, that's I don't know. You can sign off your name and just sign Benga Odunto. The fact that you didn't put Dr. Benga Odunto,
it doesn't mean it's not me.
So, but
it's even more usual to put doctor or prof than to put SAN.
An email. This is just an email, not really like a written document. So the next thing
he was trying to distance himself from that particular email. What is the likelihood that some other Bello Adoke, somewhere in the universe, sends an email to the bank to unlock money into other people's hands?
Well, unfortunately,
is it more likely that it's coming from a Bello Adoke who has been involved and who will benefit from this transfer?
It is totally unlikely, because the email was not sent to the general pool email of JPMorgan. Number one. Number two, the email was sent to someone who has had continuous relationship, meetings, and previous email communications with Mohamed Bello Adoke. And the company that was going to be the beneficiary of the transaction is such a company that is also connected with Bello Adoke, with which he had the relationship and business transactions before. So now the expectation of any reasonable person,
average reasonable man, the man on the Clapham bus, as they say in England.
Who would want to challenge the authenticity of that email would have been to write either to the Italian prosecutor and say, don't recognize that document. It is a subject of forgery, number one. Number two, write to JPMorgan and say, you have been reported to have tendered a document, purportedly from me, and dissociate yourself from it. That's number two. Number three, write to the UK authority and say, investigate this email that was sent by JPMorgan, because I didn't send it. And the last one, write to the UK court, alerting the UK court to the forgery that is associated. None of this was done by Adoke. Rather, he's saying, he then wrote a complaint against those who said, so he was deliberate in his target. And he wrote the complaint to the police here and said, the email was forged. And he is suspecting those who wrote the petition to EFCC and the Italian prosecutor leading to his investigation and the investigation of OPL245 are suspected to be behind the
forgery of the email.
I mean, what would be the motive? What would be the benefit for
what would you gain? What would you, Lanre Suraju, gain if 1.1 billion or 1.3 billion is paid into the hands of Danny Titi? At that time, where were you in those years? Or I think we were still, so maybe we didn't even have our first cars then.
Absolutely. Nobody even knew that there was that transaction and business between them as at that time.
At that time, we didn't know what was going on. So what have you got to gain? Writing an email. It's crazy what these people try to get away with and the arguments that they make in courts.
And
in a decent society, they really shouldn't recover from this. Please go on.
So unfortunately, so when we saw that, we felt, okay, so this is an opportunity to actually get to the root of the alleged forgery and also that email. And we thought that we were dealing with the police that would actually investigate the matter. So we wrote to the Italian prosecutor and said, this man has alleged forgery of this email you obtained from the SFO, and then also you submitted to the Italian court. And the Italian prosecutor wrote us back through our lawyer and said there was no chance of any element of forgery to have happened with that email. Because one, it was submitted by JPMorgan to the court and accepted in court by UK court as evidence, one. The Italian prosecutor wrote to the, and we were waiting for the police to do the proper investigation and get to the root of the matter by getting any doubt cleared by either the Special Fraud Office, which could by the British High Commission here in Nigeria, or the Italian Embassy here in Nigeria, or even the Ministry of Justice here in Nigeria. Unfortunately, those were not done. When it was discovered that they can't sustain the allegation of forgery, which was what the allegation that Adoke made in his complaint, the police then came around and prodding into our organizational existence, the financial history of our organization, by asking for the financial statements of the organization, going to check with the registration of the organization. And when it was discovered that the organization was fully registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission and we have fulfilled all
if they had any self-respect for their institution, the fact that they are having to even just check the papers of your organization itself is scandalous. Your organization, the Human Environmental Development Agency, has been working with the Nigerian security forces now for decades. You work very closely with the EFCC, you work closely with the ICPC, you work closely with Code of Conduct. You've done seminars together, you've done trainings with them, where your organization trains them.
We've actually also sued them to, we have actually, including the Office of the Attorney General and the police. And you can only do that based on your legal status.
This is one of the things that came out of my interview with Shiwore recently, where he said clearly that the Nigerian police force operates in several units and cowboy, cells that do not actually talk to each other, don't know what they are doing, but they are runaway, cowboy operations of their own. That was the impression I had when we went to that particular unit. What's it called again? The IG's unit for what?
The IGP monitoring unit.
IGP monitoring unit. The names they even come up with.
No, it was actually meant to monitor the activities and operations of the police officers.
So how does that now lead them to investigating you for an email?
But
because that's the unit that must have been compromised.
What that office does is it was compromised, but it was such a powerful unit because it reports directly to the IG, but it has enormous power. So it was so much feared by even police officers. And when we sensed the compromise, we wrote a counter petition to this is also very interesting. We wrote a counter petition to the Inspector General of Police, and our counter petition was by the IG himself, minuted to the IG, which is the next in rank to the IG. The person heading the IG monitoring unit is just an assistant commissioner of police. So you can imagine the gap between the assistant commissioner of police. After that, you have the deputy commissioner of police. After that, you will have the commissioner of police. After that, you have the inspector general, assistant inspector general of police, before you get to the deputy inspector general of police. The deputy inspector general of police minuted on the complaint from the IG, directing such a claim, such a case, if had been is complaint of police in the IGP monitoring unit, asking it to update it and transfer the file based on the latest IG instruction to the DIG. So it was acting under the IG and DIG instruction to request for it. This assistant commissioner of police at the IGP units outrightly refused to respond to the request. Totally refused, and throughout.
So there's no proper discipline, no command and control in the Nigerian police force as of today.
I've never seen such level of insubordination in even ordinary paramilitary agencies of government. It never happened. But that I witnessed with the police force. And when the IGP unit couldn't find any basis of any form of criminal infraction, there was no evidence, nothing at all. You can tell from the whole situation that the so-called report of the investigation was written outside the office of the IGP unit, because it decided to then say it has investigated, nothing was investigated, and said that our organization was not registered. I mean, that you can do on your computer,
the website of the
website
Corporate Affairs Commission.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then also that element of cyber stalking was also established.
Please, what exactly is cyber stalking?
It is such a nebulous one that it's difficult for you to pin down. And according to the Cybercrime Act 2015 that established the offense, it can actually really be determined by the prosecutor. And that was why the ECOWAS court actually ruled against the law, that it is repugnant to human rights, and it also conflicts with the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and directed that Nigeria should either go and repeal it or should go and amend the law.
So the law itself has been questioned by a superior court of the African continent, and that was the law they chose to use to harass.
Yeah, because they know that it is open to the manipulation of the prosecutors. But the most amazing thing was that I mean, there must be the evidence to support a prima facie case that will be instituted. In this case, there was none, not even a single printout of the cyber stalking, not one.
So where are we now? Are you discharged and acquitted, or discharged?
So because of the embarrassment that the thing had cost them, so we have just been discharged and the case has been struck out. Our lawyer moved for the acquittal. And of course, well, in the decision, possibly the wise decision of the judge, she decided that she was going to support the claim of the Ministry of Justice by striking it out. Even though she said, well, it is in their practice, they would say they would come back, but they will never come back. But that is not the law. That is mere sentiment. That the law that in that situation, like our lawyer said, the accused person should be discharged and acquitted. So yeah, but she agreed that she was going to discharge and then just strike out the case. So that is where we are, and that was what happened yesterday in court.
Well, we're very grateful for what we had yesterday. The likelihood that such a malicious prosecution would continue are quite low, even in a system like Nigeria, because to begin with, it's based on nothing. Secondly, the outcome of the court case in the UK is likely to make any form of doubt remaining as to the authorship of that email in question disappear entirely.
The Nigerian government,
the Nigerian government is relying on the same email in a court case in the UK right now. And that's the email that you are supposed to have written. I mean, you can't make it up. You can't make it up.
Really? Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's documented, it's written, it was mentioned in the open court that it was sent by Adoke, and that was by the lawyer to the Nigerian government. Yeah.
But sadly, I mean, we started off this talking about the personal sacrifices that I mean, activists have had to make, you yourself in so many other places and in so many other ways. And the latest one, again, it has been the attack on your personal safety, which every segment of the Nigerian press, all reputable, mainstream press in Nigeria are quite unified in their view that this is related to your activism on the OPL245 scandal. You were attacked at home. I've been attacked once. I mean, there's hardly any Nigerian up to the age of 30 who hasn't gone through some nasty experience. I had one, I went through a carjacking incident in 2016, 15 actually, in Nigeria. I would never forget the helplessness of the situation, the way my car was surrounded with 2 cars and 2 trailers. Four vehicles were used to carjack me on the Fadeyi Bridge in Lagos. It's still one of the things I thank my stars, God, the forces of the universe for. And I came out of that, not only with my life, I thank those boys who kidnapped me briefly. I thank them a lot for not just that they didn't kill me, but that they didn't give me that thing I don't like at all, which is pain. They didn't slap me, they didn't beat me, but it was a nasty, nasty experience because they had guns on them. I was the only one in the middle of the car. They took me for a while and then they took the car away. So I lost the car, I lost a few personal items and all that. So it's a nasty thing. You went through a similar, maybe even worse one because it now involved your family. How much of this would you be able to tell us?
Well, you can be able to tell some of the physical ones, but you'd be very difficult to tell some of the psychological ones. But I can say that it's been such a very traumatic experience, and it's difficult to assume that we would have the situation degenerate to that level where some measure of attack or pressure on the family would be used to exert some form of pressure on you, possibly to either stop what you've been doing. And it takes people of little mind, to undertake some sort of scheming. I mean, this was a situation where in an estate of over 200 houses, my house became the only subject of the invasion. And it wasn't just my house. I can say my apartment, because there are 2 other occupants within the same compound, within the same building behind mine, and nothing happened to them. They never even knew anything happened till assailants operated and left. I mean, this happened while we were sleeping. I mean, in the dead middle of the night, of over past 2 a.m. and lasted for like over 1.5 hours, you know, of 5 FT guys with guns, machetes, and knife, you know, rampaging the whole house, cutting away all our devices, my office bag with all the documents in them, the laptop, the iPad, including those of my children and that of my wife. Yeah, they also made away with the jewelries of my wife, some cash that we had left over in the house, and ultimately with our car, you know. This was very difficult, you know, to really imagine that it was really happening. It would have been a different experience if this was done while on the road, you know, so you would know that this was just targeted at you, but this was deliberately also done to have the effect of putting the family in such, you know, trauma and psychological pressure of, because it could have been anything otherwise. I mean, one of them openly said that that I should be shot, you know, in the leg because, yeah, because the guy leading them, no, don't mean, but something tells me that you are innocent, you know. So and really asked me, are you truly innocent? And I said, well,
so this in quotes robbers were asking you about innocence. Innocence about what?
Oh yeah, yeah, I swear, was asking me if I was, and I said, yeah, by God, I'm sure I'm innocent of what it is that you must have heard. I'm trying to distract from, you know, the robbery. I at that point that this is just armed robbery, and you know, probably must have gone to the other occupants or other guys are so dealing with other occupants in the building. You know, but I who offered to shoot in the leg, then blew me in the head with his knuckle. And the gang leader said, no, stop that, you know, and asked them to get everything they could get, and then, you know, locked us up.
They were specifically interested in gadgets and in your laptop.
Every
and documents.
All of the documents, my office bag, even the bag that because I was meant to travel the next day for the official office engagement. The bag that I was putting on the side with some other documents and stuff, they actually used also that to carry away a host of other documents like that. So
I was particularly, I mean, I wasn't happy to hear of it for so many reasons, your personal safety and all that, but I was particularly horrified by the fact that all those notes you diligently took at the London courts on your laptop is all gone.
Yeah, I mean,
it's original, I mean, real-time observations of the witness statements.
Absolutely, yeah. They were all taken away with the laptop.
Thank God, I mean, I took some and a few others over there.
Absolutely. So as at the time he was saying they were acting on instruction, I felt he was just trying to distract from the robbery activities. So I felt this was just happening to us. It's also happening to the other, you know, occupants in behind our own apartments. It was not only after they had left, but luckily one of my daughters was very smart to have succeeded in hiding her own phone, which she hid behind, you know, a drawer in her room. And when they left, she quickly brought it out. So we then used the phone to call the neighbors. I mean, for me, I was just calling them to be sure that they are fine.
Yeah.
And I was surprised when they were still sounding very sleepy. And I was like, I was like, are you guys okay? And they said, yeah, they're okay. We were surprised, actually, hearing that from me. And I said, oh, are you sleeping? The lady said, yes. Did anything happen? She said, nothing. You didn't hear anything. They didn't even hear anything. I mean, it was professionally done. They didn't even hear that, you know, they were robbing us or they were
from what I gather, you live in a guarded estate. So
yeah,
this was a professional job that they were able to enter, not detected by the perimeter security. And then you were able to leave as well, successfully.
Yeah, it was.
Hello? Hello?
As that, like, before.
Yeah. You're back.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Now I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so it was at the point when they were leaving that, because the gate had about four gates. So they went to the least manned one, which had just only one guard, and actually held the guard up at gunpoint, had him tied up, hit him with the butt of the gun in his head, and then used the industrial cutter to actually cut open the padlocks to the gate and then drove off with the car. So, yeah.
Terrible experience.
Hello.
Yeah, hello, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Very terrible experience, but we thank God that you came out of it in a very bizarre way. I thank them that they didn't hurt you as well. The same way I thank the people who kidnapped me briefly and left me for not harming me. Because when you are in their hands, you are in many senses very helpless. You don't know this script that is playing, where it's going to end. You know you live in a country where there is no 911 to call.
The guy who actually blew me could have actually shot the gun.
He could have left you with
why did you do
terrible
it?
scar
today. So it's not like there will be any consequence for that his action beyond just a reprimand by his other colleagues. Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. It's a terrible thing to have gone through, and in many ways we consider this a warning shot from the terrible powers that be. I will just ask you one last question before I let you go, because you've given us a lot of your time, and I appreciate this. And I tell you, this is not the only time we're going to speak. We're coming back to talk grand picture at some point, not just this particular case, which we are happy the direction everything has gone. Where do you see all this going for Nigeria? We have had two clerics at the top of the nation's affairs. One is an Islamic cleric, the president, who is a stoic disciplinarian with strong anti-corruption past. And the other is the vice president, who is a pastor, another, as you know, very clean reputation, as at the time he came into office, at least. And I mean, I keep regretting the fact that we're not going to have people who at least pretend to have such a clean and disciplinarian past. Perhaps in our living, God knows what horrors will come. And yet, I should just say yet, we still have this disappointing, period of rulership and disappointing anti-corruption, fight. What's the future likely to hold for us as Nigerians? when there will be no longer be a real pretense for anti-corruption. A lot of people look at people like us, and I don't know what your experience personally is, but I can tell you of my experience. A lot of my friends, colleagues who are Nigerians, they keep attacking me for my support for this government and saying, are we blind? Can't we see that they are this or they are that? The one thing that I think ties all of us together in our respect for this government was that expectation of anti-corruption, philosophy in governance. That is all, Lanre. Yeah, are you back? Good. That is all wrapping up now. And my fear is that I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what future holds for us in terms of expectation. Are we going back into a period of gluttony? That's the most nauseating thing for me. People can talk about what they call hypocrisy and all that. I will still deal with the hypocrite, as bad as that is, than with the kind of governments we have had in the past, who make no pretense at all, and it's job for the boys and transferring of money out of the country and corruption and what are you expecting over the next few years after the change of this government?
It is extremely tough, if you look at the number of charlatans that are associated with the electoral process and also jostling for the office of the president come 2023, then you will just want to admit that it's almost an hopeless situation. It is just totally hopeless. It is rather also unfortunate when you look at the political parties and you can't see any form of seriousness. You can't see any form of paradigm shift from just the philosophy of the capturing of power at all costs. It is not about any serious program. And it's very simple. If you look at the opposition party, it would claim the federal of the ruling party is not doing sufficiently enough.
The opposition party is actually hollowed out now.
Its
substantive function has removed itself and is now sitting in the party in power. So we practically have no opposition.
And none at all. If we even go to the states where the opposition...
I mean, I'm sure you are aware that the president, the former president of the country that is in the opposition party, Jonathan, good luck, Jonathan, is now surfacing as a candidate to become president again in the party that is in power. So he's moved. The president has moved parties. This is what you were saying about capturing power at any cost.
Any cost, any means necessary. So there's really little hope for any change that would happen in governance or in government under the current circumstances that we operate. So it is very sad that we can't point under the ongoing process, that there are no new entrants into the political landscape. I mean, if you just go and check, maybe probably except for Tunde Bakari, who is like a pastor and is just coming around, most of the other guys were either former governors, current ministers, including the abysmally performed central bank governor, who is actually breaking the record of unprecedented abuse of office, and also the pollution of the landscape, the political landscape, with his aspiration to be the president, which actually is in violation of the CBN Act, under which he assumed office as CBN governor. I mean, this is the unfortunate bizarre system that, like you said, well, I will disagree. Unfortunately, Buhari is not a cleric; he is just a Muslim. So you can say.
No, I mean, he has to. I mean, people would nearly swear he's a cleric.
No, it's not one. It's not one. That's why, I mean, they would have given him something like a sheikh, like an imam, like something like that. But it's a Muslim, no doubt. But you can say he's a disciplinarian. What we used to know about him with his military background and also former position in office, but we have seen a complete different departure from that, you know, with some of the circumstances that are unfolding under him, because I wouldn't say they unfolded, they are still unfolding, and we don't know the ones that were also still going to come up in the nearest future. So it's obvious that in Nigeria, most of those that pretend to be very religious are not actually godly. So because we are some very religious people are swayed by allegiance to some religious purity and claim of, you know, not godliness, because many times we don't look at the people's profile in terms of their background, in terms of their profile. It is just the claim to religiosity that attracts us to them, and the hypocrisy that are associated with such claims. So now it might be better, like you said, you know, it might be better to even deal with, you know, less religious people in office than this so-called, because most of all the people that you want to point at and even are accused of some of the abuse of office, corruption, and corrupt practices have their allegiance to either Islam or Christianity, majority. And you see them with their flowing gown on Fridays going to the mosque, and you see them on Sunday with their best outfits going to the church, sitting in the front, and all the rest of that. And they leave the churches and mosques to still go and perpetuate their act of, you know, indecency. So the religion is not part of the criteria that should be considered in selecting public office holder in Nigeria. I think we should be now familiar with that realization. I thank you very much for the time and the audience.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lanre Suraju. It's been inspiring talking to you, and wishing you all the best. I hope to see you soon. We have our meeting spots and meeting occasions.
Absolutely.
We'll keep down the wraps. Thanks very much. Enjoy the time. Bye.